beer, it's good for you.
Hello and welcome to the video. Within this video we will be looking at the differences between homebrewers and commercial brewers. As someone who has actually spent much time within both roles, I have often thought about what separates both types of brewer, despite that for many years I was actually both at the same time. It is fair to say that both sides of brewing have influenced each other for me, and I hope that my findings and observations here prove both useful and interesting for others. Naturally, these are simply my perceptions. Others may have found things differently on either side. For me, one of the largest differences is around recipe development, so let's look at this first along with what is commonly involved for both types of brewer. Commercial brewers spend a lot of time developing their recipes with an approach with a focus on their future. Many of them simply need to ensure that a recipe is of a gold standard due to the fact that there will be a limit to how many different beers they can produce in a given year. So essentially each beer needs to be as good as they can possibly make it. Only the larger cash-rich breweries can deviate from this path into experimental limited batches, and often these are done for marketing mostly rather than income. For most breweries, making each beer really count is simply because they know that each beer has the potential to be the next best seller, and this can account for 70% or more of their overall yearly sales, so the approach has to be very thorough. Often this begins with a few different directions for the same beer and multiple versions are produced for consideration. This involves much small batch brewing and taste testing that in time can develop outside of the brewery via blind taste testings with the public to see which version has the most public appeal. Once a taste profile version is decided upon, often this is when even more tweaking is made to add in as much greatness as possible. The ingredients used in these sorts of recipes also need to be secure when it comes to purchasing them into the future. Naturally, because these ingredients are literally coming out of the ground, they do change from harvest to harvest, and the brewery will also need to adjust their recipe yearly to keep the taste of the beer as close as possible as the previous production runs. Repeatability is everything for a commercial brewer. In contrast, most homebrewers are simply not writing their own recipes, though as most of my viewers know, this is something I promote and urge them to do. Many will simply find a recipe they like the look of, or will buy an all-grain kit from a homebrew store and brew it once before moving on to the next one. People en masse these days are more interested in simply trying a new beer every time, and apps like Untappd fit well into this scene. The trouble being though that this makes life much harder for the smaller breweries, of course. Many homebrewers that are interested in recipe writing tend to base their recipes on those from others, often combining ideas from other recipe writers and then simply brew a full batch volume rather than doing any test batches and tweaking. Naturally, there is nothing wrong in any of this. It is down to the individual to take their brewing in the direction that best suits them. For me as an ex-commercial brewer, my recipe process is still within a commercial path to a certain extent, but this is because for me recipe development is where I have the most fun with the hobby. The chase for that golden master recipe is in many ways what keeps me very interested, and is even better now that I have a YouTube channel where I can share my end recipes en masse with the public. Another major difference is the level of equipment that homebrewers and commercial brewers are using, and this may surprise you. Homebrewers these days have some really advanced equipment that is developed by specialist homebrew companies that quite frankly is far more convenient and easy to use compared to the equipment used by many commercial brewers around the world. They also boast some very useful features too. Preheat timers, for example, are available on most home brewing systems these days. We also have heating that features PID algorithm technology. Some brewing systems also feature Bluetooth and Wi-Fi logging and control. Mid-range and upwards modern homebrewing systems also feature the latest heating elements which offer ultra-low watt density, meaning that there are no hotspots to the element and the whole element has a uniform temperature, which avoids burning on the bottom plate and caramelization, plus it protects the element, meaning that its lifespan is increased. The evolution of the electric all-in-one homebrewing system has really led the way on much of this technology, with companies worldwide like Grainfather Brew Tools and Kegland leading the way with their own unique ways of doing things and pricing structures. All of this technology has also had a big influence on other brewing related items like fermentation vessels and unitanks, but there are vessels available at all price points. So for example, if a homebrewer wishes to ferment under pressure, then companies like Kegland have very cost-effective PET plastic solutions that have quite simply dominated the world market because simply everyone can afford them, and they keep making upgrades to make each version better than the last despite the low cost. If you want to head into stainless steel solutions with a tech built in, then companies like Grainfather and Brew Tools offer some very capable solutions. Like Kegland products, both Grainfather and Brew Tools are available to a large slice of the world market. The American homebrew market boasts the largest selection though, with a great exclusive to the USA companies like Spike and Brewbuilt, to name just two, that us Europeans wish we had access to within their large range of unitanks. On top of this, there's also a very large range of other accessory products, including those very useful floating digital hydrometers that are available to homebrewers. The sheer volume of selection for options for homebrewers is quite simply immense, and they can simply make their own decisions according to their budget. In contrast, breweries are in general very slow to make upgrades to their equipment because it simply cannot be cost effective to change an entire brew house very often due to its high cost, which naturally varies according to size. So the chance of the average commercial brewer using the very latest of kit is really rather low, sad but reality. Many commercial brewers find themselves using old brewhouse equipment that has been patched and fixed many times and as such has quirks that they need to learn to work around. Some are also using repurposed equipment that was designed for other industries in the beginning but that was bought cheap and adapted. The brewers themselves often have to keep pushing the brewery for upgraded equipment, and it is seldom something that is right around the corner, you can be sure of that. However, breweries do need very high-end products for measurements in many cases to simply protect the brewery. Just one example is that if a beer says 5% ABV on its label, then anything else is simply fraud. Breweries can be slapped with very large fines or even closure for such things, whereas naturally a homebrewer has no reason for concern if his 5% beer turns out to be something a little different. In the words of the great Charlie Papazian, relax, don't worry, have a homebrew. No such slogan is available to breweries, of course, who are usually operating as a business under pressure due to having more and more competition and red tape. The next area of difference between homebrewers and commercial brewers is within the mash, so let's dive in, just not literally. Firstly, having a precise and uniform mash temperature is something that is seen as important to homebrewers, and some even believe, incorrectly I might add, that they have it. Let me explain. Almost all homebrewing systems simply feature one temperature probe, which naturally is only accurate at its own position. The Grainfather G40 shown here actually has two probes to develop an average temperature, which is also useful for providing a failsafe in detecting a poor flow. The new Gen 4 Brewzilla systems are also compatible with a new Bluetooth-enabled accessory temperature device that is going to be released later on this year that will also provide an average mash temperature too, but these are exceptions to the norm when it comes to homebrewing systems. Within a regular homebrewing system's design, heating elements and temperature probes also need to be quite close together to avoid overheating. This means that the temperature shown in your average homebrewing system's display is often the hottest point of the brewing system, and even those that recirculate with much power via a pump will have a range of different temperatures throughout the mash. You will also find that the cheaper brewing systems often are not even accurate at the one point they are measuring at, as the probe is of a cheaper type, which means it is only really having any level of accuracy at boiling temperatures. These probes are much cheaper because they also serve the tea-urn market amongst other areas of mass demand, whereas a temperature probe that is accurate at mashing temperatures and boiling temperatures is brewing specialist, and due to the lower demand and extra areas of accuracy, it is much more expensive to build into a brewing system. To test this yourself with your own home brewing equipment, you will need a decent thermometer with good accuracy that has a long stretching probe. In contrast, commercial brewers are simply targeting a range of temperature in their mash by selecting an average temperature point, rather than thinking that the whole mash will be the same temperature, which is simply not going to be possible to achieve without astronomical cost, especially in large-scale brewing, but more to the point, with modern malt it is simply not necessary to have anything more. Secondly, the other difference is around mash time, as many commercial brewers will not mash for longer than 40 minutes for each brew. Once you have mashed the same amount of the same grain more than a few times, you know within a certain amount of accuracy when conversion will be complete, so mashing for longer is not needed, and because a brewery is a business, time is money. It is fair to say that not every homebrewer mashes for 60 minutes, but it is very much a standardized time across recipes shared for homebrewers. I share this mash time myself because the extra 20 minutes at home is a fair trade-off to ensure that you have a full conversion. If you're in a hurry though, you can certainly perform a starch test at home by using iodine. This is pronounced in American English as iodine. In reality, mash time is dependent on various factors, including the consistency of your grist, the thickness of the mash, and most importantly what you're actually mashing grain-wise due to diastatic power. So essentially, due to all of this, there is going to be some variation between recipes on the total mash time needed. So because home brewers are usually brewing different recipes each time they brew, unlike a commercial brewer, this is going to be tricky to predict with any real accuracy. I do hope that you have enjoyed this short list of differences between homebrewers and commercial brewers. There are of course other differences in methods and attitudes of course, so let me know if you'd be interested in a part 2 of this video. I do hope that you found this video useful, informative and interesting. If so, why not consider liking and subscribing? For further support you can join the channel's Facebook group, and if you would like to support the channel then check out the channel's merchandise store, as all profits go back into the channel. Until next time, happy brewing!